So imagine two men pass away, right? And one of them holds a PhD from Stanford.
Okay.
He attended the University of Chicago Northwestern on full scholarships and earned this massive prestigious salary in government. But the other guy, he's an eighth-grade dropout.
Quite the contrast.
Exactly. But here is the kicker. Why does the PhD leave behind a literal mountain of debt while the dropout leaves behind a multi-million-dollar empire of real estate and businesses?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question.
Yep.
Literally.
Right. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We've got this fascinating summary document sitting on the desk today titled Two Dads.Docs. And it's basically an exploration of the foundational philosophy behind Robert Kiyosaki's famous financial teachings. And our mission today is for you, the listener, to wrestle with the mechanics of this really profound contradiction. Like, why do incredibly smart, academically gifted people so often die broke, while others with almost no formal education build generational wealth?
It is such a striking contradiction.
Yeah.
And I mean, it completely subverts that traditional roadmap that, most of us are handed from day one.
Go to school, get good grades.
Exactly. We are taught that academic excellence directly translates to financial security.
Yeah.
But this text forces us to confront the reality that they are entirely different skill sets.
Yeah.
I mean, they are governed by completely different rules.
Well, the document introduces this core premise right out of the gate with a quote. It says, "Having two dads offered me the choice of contrasting points of view, one of a rich man and one of a poor man."
Right.
So, okay, let's unpack this, because we aren't just looking at two guys with different bank balances here. We are looking at two entirely different operating systems.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
It's kind of like, imagine having two different GPS systems in your car, right? And both of them are insisting they know the absolute fastest route to success, but they are giving you entirely opposite directions. Turn left versus turn right.
Yeah, that operating system or GPS analogy is exactly the right lens for this. Because what we're analyzing in these notes, it isn't just a biography of two men.
No, not at all.
It's a structural breakdown of belief systems.
Yeah.
And more importantly, how those belief systems actually dictate capital allocation.
Right.
These two father figures, they were operating in the exact same physical economy, but they were living in entirely different financial realities because, they understood the mechanics of money in fundamentally opposed ways.
Okay, so let's boot up that first operating system.
Knew it.
Because this is the route that, most of society considers the correct and safe path. This is the biological father, who the source refers to as the poor dad.
Right, the peach.
Yeah, and we really have to look closely at his credentials because they are staggering. I mean, he was not a slouch.
No, very hardworking.
He wasn't lazy at all. A PhD, multiple elite university degrees, top-tier government salary. And yet the text tells us he lived paycheck to paycheck and died in debt. And I have to push back on conventional wisdom here, because if you have a top-tier salary, how do you mathematically end up drowning in debt? I mean, have we falsely equated a high W-2 income with actual wealth?
We have. We absolutely have. And that is precisely the trap that the poor dad fell into.
Yeah.
His financial failure, it had nothing to do with a lack of work ethic.
Right.
The text makes it very clear both men were incredibly hardworking. But the poor dad's fatal flaw was conflating a high income with wealth retention.
Making money versus keeping money.
Exactly. He genuinely believed that a large salary guaranteed financial security. And that created a massive blind spot regarding his expenses.
Oh, I see.
Because when you rely solely on a high salary, you are operating in an environment where your income is taxed at the absolute highest rates. And typically, as that W-2 income rises, so do the lifestyle liabilities.
Oh, right. Lifestyle creep.
Yes, the bigger house, the nicer cars, the private schools.
You start making $500,000, but suddenly your required carrying costs become $500,001. It almost seems like his academic brilliance actually gave him a false sense of security. Like he figured, well, I'm smart, I make a lot of money, therefore I must be winning the money game.
Yeah, that's spot on. Academic intelligence is about mastering a specific curriculum to arrive at a known answer, right? You follow the syllabus, you get the A.
Sure.
But financial intelligence is about understanding cash flow. It's managing risk. It's knowing how to legally structure assets to mitigate taxes. The poor dad mastered the academic game, but he assumed the rules of the financial game were exactly the same.
Get the highest grade, get the highest salary, win.
Right. But a high salary is just a larger volume of water flowing through a bucket with a hole in the bottom.
Oh, man.
If you don't know how to plug that hole, which is essentially what financial literacy is, the bucket still empties out, no matter how much you pour in.
Wow. Which brings us to the second operating system. Because if formal education and a high salary didn't plug the hole in the bucket for the poor dad, how on earth did the other father figure succeed?
Right, Mike's father.
Yeah, the rich dad. Because on paper, I mean, his credentials are a disaster.
A disaster.
The text states he never even finished the 8th grade, no prestigious degrees, absolutely no academic safety net.
He is the structural antithesis of the biological father.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, without any of those traditional markers of intelligence, he built this massive empire in Hawaii.
Right. Businesses, warehouses, restaurants, real estate.
Exactly. And he eventually leaves tens of millions of dollars to his family
Yeah.
and to charity. It just completely shatters that whole stay in school to get rich narrative.
It really does. Now, the document points out that schools are incredibly efficient at teaching professional skills, like how to be a highly specialized employee.
Very efficient.
But they completely ignore financial literacy. But let's elevate this for a second, because we all know high schools don't teach you how to read an income statement.
Obviously.
The real question is why. I mean, here's where it gets really interesting. It's like schools are teaching people how to be world-class cogs in a machine, but nobody is teaching them how to own the machine.
That's a great analogy.
So why does this educational blind spot even exist? If a system is designed to prepare us for life, why omit the fundamental mechanics of capital?
Well, if we look at it structurally, the traditional education system just wasn't formalized to create independent wealth builders.
What was it formalized for?
It was scaled during the Industrial Revolution. The main goal was to create a reliable, obedient, punctual workforce to run factories and giant corporations.
Ah,
So the curriculum was highly optimized to produce good employees. And a good employee is someone who values job security, follows instructions, and is willing to trade their finite time for a steady wage.
makes sense.
Financial literacy, actually teaching people how to acquire assets and decouple their income from their time, that structurally runs counter to a system that needs a dependent workforce.
So wait, the poor dad was actually the ultimate success story of that industrial design?
He really was.
He was the perfect specialized employee. But because the rich dad dropped out before the system could fully install that employee operating system, he was forced to learn the actual mechanics of the economy from the outside.
Exactly. He realized early on that trading time for money is just a linear trap. It's the difference between carrying water in buckets versus building a pipeline.
Okay, unpack that.
So the poor dad, despite his PhD and his high salary, he was just carrying a very expensive bucket.
Okay.
He still had to wake up and walk back and forth to the river every single day. The rich dad, on the other hand, used his time to build a pipeline.
A pipeline.
Right. It took massive effort up front, probably with no immediate payoff.
Yeah.
But once that pipeline was built, the water flowed whether he was working, sleeping, or on a beach.
That is so powerful. And the source points out that building that pipeline starts with something that seems surprisingly minor, like the literal words they used every single day. And I found the language aspect of this document fascinating, but I do want to scrutinize it a bit.
I'll go for it.
Because it contrasts how the two dads approached an expensive obstacle. The poor dad would look at something he wanted and say, I can't afford it.
Right.
The rich dad absolutely forbade those words. He insisted on asking, how can I afford it? And the text claims, I can't afford it, shuts down the brain, while how can I afford it activates it.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the linguistic shift is crucial because language is the interface of our cognition.
Okay.
I can't afford it is a declarative statement. It's final. When you state it, you are actively giving your brain permission to just stop calculating.
Yeah.
It's an abdication of responsibility.
Yeah.
You're essentially saying, well, the constraints of the world are absolute, and I have zero agency to change them.
I have to push back hard here, though. Let's talk actual mechanics. Is simply changing your vocabulary really going to build a real estate empire?
No, of course not.
Because if I walk past a multi-million-dollar commercial property and I just keep muttering, how can I afford it? How can I afford it? I'm not going to magically manifest the capital. Doesn't this border on just, self-help motivational fluff?
If it stopped at the vocabulary, yes, it would absolutely be fluff.
Mm-hmm.
But the text isn't suggesting the secret where you just think really hard about wealth and it appears.
Right.
Asking, how can I afford it, isn't a magic spell. It's a cognitive forcing function.
A forcing function.
Yeah. When you ask the brain a question, it acts as a problem-solving engine. It is forced to audit your resources. It makes you ask, okay, what skills do I have? Who do I know? What value can I create to generate the capital required for this asset?
I see.
The poor dad's phrase is the language of a victim of circumstance. The rich dad's question demands an active strategic audit of leverage. The language is really just the visible tip of an entirely different structural approach to capital.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's the spark that forces the mechanical work to happen.
Exactly.
And that active framing naturally bled into completely opposite life strategies. Let's look at how these two operating systems actually deployed capital, because the document weaves these differences together perfectly.
They are polar opposite playbooks.
Literally. Take the classic debate over housing. Poor dad believed his home was his greatest asset. Rich dad firmly stated that a house is a liability.
And this is where the mathematical reality of the rich dad's philosophy really disrupts conventional wisdom.
Oh, totally.
We are conditioned to believe that a primary residence is the ultimate financial achievement. But the rich dad evaluated everything strictly through the mechanics of cash flow.
Okay, break that down.
Very simply, an asset puts money into your pocket, independent of your labor. A liability takes money out of your pocket.
But wait, if my house appreciates in value by $100,000 over a decade, how is that a liability?
Because capital appreciation is speculative, while cash flow is a monthly reality. Even if the house appreciates on paper month to month, what is it doing? It requires a mortgage payment, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, interest.
The roof leaks.
Right. It is actively bleeding cash from your balance sheet every single 30 days. The rich dad wasn't saying never buy a house. He was saying don't confuse a capital drain with a capital generator.
Wow.
He focused on acquiring actual assets like commercial real estate or businesses that generated positive cash flow today. And then that cash flow could pay for the liability of the primary residence.
That is such a huge distinction, and that completely shifts how you approach your career, too. Because the text notes, the poor dad advised studying hard to find a good company to work for.
Right.
But the rich dad advised studying hard to find a good company to buy. Because if you understand that a house is bleeding your cash, you realize that a W-2 salary, which is taxed heavily, as we said, is a very slow way to cover that bleed.
Yes, exactly.
You need a system that generates revenue outside of your own physical labor.
Because working for a company means you are the mechanism generating surplus value for the owner.
You're the bucket carrier.
Exactly. But buying a company or investing in one means you are acquiring a system that generates surplus value for you. It goes right back to the bucket versus the pipeline.
Yeah.
The poor dad was looking for the safest, most prestigious bucket.
And the rich dad was looking for the most efficient pipeline.
Exactly.
Which brings us to maybe the most controversial mechanical strategy in the text. Cash flow management.
Oh, yeah.
Poor dad paid his bills first. Rich dad paid himself first. And on the surface, paying your bills first just sounds like basic adult responsibility.
It does.
I mean, if you don't pay the mortgage or the credit card, you ruin your credit, you lose your home.
Right.
How does paying yourself first actually work in practice without completely destroying your life?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that paying yourself first is not just, tossing $50 in a savings account at the end of the month.
Right.
It is an aggressive, artificial constraint on capital allocation. The rich dad treated his investments, his asset column, as his most urgent creditor. When income came in, the capital was immediately diverted into assets. Before the mortgage, before the utilities.
But practically speaking, I mean, if the money goes to the asset column and there isn't enough left for the electric bill, the power company turns off the lights. The stress of that seems completely counterproductive.
For a normal operating system, yes.
Yeah.
But the rich dad used that exact stress as the catalyst for financial genius.
Wait, really?
Yeah, by deliberately creating a shortfall in his liability column, he forced his brain to answer the question, how can I afford it?
Oh, wow.
The pressure of the unpaid bills motivated him to hustle, to create new income streams, to find new deals. He let the pressure build his financial muscles.
That is intense.
It is. The poor dad paid everyone else first, and whatever meager scraps were left over, if any, went to savings. The result is that the poor dad's asset column starved, while the rich dad's asset column compounded.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at how these pieces fit together, poor dad was basically playing defense, right?
Very much so.
His entire life was structured around risk mitigation. He wanted a secure job, a secure house, and he paid his bills first to avoid late fees. He was terrified of losing. But by trying to eliminate all risk, he eliminated all leverage.
Yes.
While the rich dad was playing offense. He systematically acquired leverage, he bought businesses, he manipulated his cash flow to force growth, he acquired assets that paid for his liabilities, he built a machine.
That is the core mechanical difference. The poor dad relied entirely on his own physical labor and his intellect to survive. If he stopped working, his income dropped to zero immediately, but his liabilities remained.
Right.
The rich dad built a system of capital that functioned entirely independent of his physical exertion. His dollars were his employees, working 247 without needing a coffee break, generating more dollars.
And as we synthesize the core message of this document, we really have to look at where these operating systems are installed in the first place.
Very true.
Because the deepest takeaway here is that our financial programming almost always comes from our parents. Most parents unknowingly pass down the poor dad mindset simply because it's the only code they were ever taught.
Right. You can't teach someone how to build a pipeline if you've spent your whole life carrying buckets.
Exactly.
They are passing down an operating system designed for an industrial economy that no longer exists in the same way.
Yeah.
And, that brings us to what might be the most profound quote in the entire summary.
Let's hear it.
The text states, "There's a difference between being poor and being broke. Broke is temporary. Poor is eternal."
Broke is temporary, poor is eternal. Mechanically, how do you interpret that difference?
It goes back to the difference between a mathematical snapshot and a systemic reality. Broke is simply a temporary liquidity issue.
Right. Your bank account is at zero.
Exactly. An entrepreneur building a pipeline might be entirely out of cash. They are broke, but they aren't poor because they are actively constructing an asset that will generate infinite returns. Core is the systemic failure to understand assets. It is the absolute permanent belief that your only option is to trade time for a wage and that investing is too risky.
Wow.
You can hand a person with a poor operating system a lottery winning of $1 million, and they will almost certainly lose it.
Yeah.
Because their internal mechanics only know how to acquire liabilities. The bucket simply empties faster.
Which brings us right to your doorstep listening to this right now. We all have one of these operating systems running in the background of our minds when it comes to money.
We do.
And you really have to audit yourself. When you look at your W-2, your primary residence, your monthly budget, are you operating on the poor dad's code? Are you optimizing for the best bucket, seeking the illusion of safety while bleeding cash to liabilities? Or are you starting to write the code of the rich dad, looking for leverage, acquiring cash-flowing assets, and building a pipeline?
It takes an intense audit of those inherited beliefs to overwrite that code.
It really does.
And as we look at the macro implications of everything we've discussed today, this actually raises a really important question, one that isn't explicitly answered in the text, but it naturally follows as economic logic.
Oh, I like where this is going.
We discussed earlier that the industrial education system was designed to create employees.
Right.
Well, if true financial literacy, the actual mechanical understanding of capital and assets that the rich dad practiced, was suddenly mandated and effectively taught to every single person across the globe, what would happen?
If everyone stopped carrying buckets and started building pipelines.
Exactly. Would our current global economic system, which relies on hundreds of millions of people willing to trade their finite time for a wage to pay off 30-year liabilities, even be able to function?
Oh, man.
Or does the engine of the modern economy secretly depend on the vast majority of the population inheriting and keeping the poor dad mindset?
That is a fascinating and slightly terrifying structural thought to walk away with. If everyone refuses to be the cog, does the machine collapse?
It's worth thinking about.
We'll leave you to chew on that. But whatever you decide, make sure you take a good, hard look at your own financial operating system today. Make sure you know exactly whose code you are running before you make your next major financial decision.